Hello, and welcome to Night.Homily. Today we're going to be talking about the ghost in the rainbow, the fluidity of purple, its manifestations and its illusions. I filmed this 5 times, and it was either wrong, something switched off, or everything died at once and I had to recharge. So I'm really hoping this goes well, and I'm going to try and film this all in one take, so wish me luck. Also, you can see the reflection of the ring light in my glasses. I will not be addressing that. I mean, I'm not sacrificing the integrity of the fit, so apologies, but we're gonna have to just go with it. These are my reading glasses, and I am reading a script. It actually hurts to read with them, but the outfit was missing something, so we're gonna do that. Okay, to the point of the video. Purple. It doesn't exist. At least not in the ways that we would expect it to. We're going to explore this through light and colour. Light is made up of photons, and these photons move as a wave throughout the electromagnetic field. Varying wavelengths correspond to varying colours, and each of these wavelengths exist on a linear spectrum according to our current conception of physics. Colour is of course physical, but it is largely circumstantial in that our brains do a lot of the work imagining up and categorizing contrast, depth, and saturation. This is why colour looks different to everyone. There is also an ecological and anthropological basis to the way in which we perceive colour. We adapt alongside our environments and influence it, as well as our environments influencing us. Also, note, I say colour a lot. I say colour a lot throughout this, so be prepared. How do we see colour? Our eyes use cone cells to perceive colour, and are sensitive to red, R, B, blue, and G, green. Colours in between RBG cones cause multiple cones to fire. So, for example, when you see yellow light, which is in between red and green, your red and green cones are being fired. I want to quickly interject myself to say that kind of makes sense to me. Like that yellow is made up of red and green, because it has the warmth of red, but the acidity of green, and I don't know if that makes sense to anyone but me, because that's a very synesthetic way of looking at things, but that's how I feel, and let me know if you also see that or sense that in a way. Back to the point. Green as a colour is in between red and blue, which is where you think purple would be, given that that's how you mix it with paint. When you are seeing green, your brain is acutely aware that it is green. When you're seeing purple, it is acutely aware that it is not green. It knows it's in between red and blue, but because the green cone isn't firing, it's like, I don't know, what is this? And then decides, okay, purple. It's literally an invention of the mind. Like, it just says, error, purple. That's kind of insane. I love that. I'm not a physicist, so if you have any more questions about this, maybe consult one. This is as far as my knowledge extends, but I'm fascinated nonetheless. So, purple and magenta fruit has been considered to be an evolutionary response called evolutionary or ecological anachronism. We will get to why that's relevant, I promise. This is a process by which plants of the past, usually fruit, adapted to stand out from their environment so as to be more visible to their now extinct predators. The plant is more effectively pollinated when its fruit, and thus seeds or spores, are spread via plant-eating animals. Magenta seemed to be the most eye-catching colour against the green, hence the development of purple fruit. It has also been theorised that extraterrestrial life, more specifically flora, could be purple. This is because it would more likely be a product of retinol rather than chlorophyll, which is an easier molecule to produce. I find this interesting, and the reason I feel this is relevant is because it is a kind of hypothetical. We're attaching purple to the extraterrestrial, 1, and the hypothetical, 2, which is very purplish in nature. And I will expand on how purple sits within this framework of something that is inexplicable. We already saw from the physics of how light works and how we perceive purple that it is kind of ephemeral, strange, not there but there, and from this hypothetical I feel it's also giving that. Let's look a little bit at how colour has been perceived through time. Purple has been a significant colour for many cultures throughout history. It has oftentimes been used to signify status, magic, radicalism, creativity, and royalty. The colour, like its physical properties, seems to be fluid in what it can be used to represent, with the only constants, and I use constants loosely because it's all dependent on cultural context, being that it is oftentimes representative of a state of being that is on the cusp, something that's between states, that has a difficult to reachness or some kind of innovation. Historically in the West, purple proved to be quite a difficult pigment to produce. The ancient Greeks and Romans used cut and dried glands of snails from Tyre, Lebanon, to make Tyrian purple. The process was laborious and rather sad for the snails, given that it took thousands to produce only 1 gram of dye. 1 gram. Thousands of snails, 1 gram. Its scarcity meant that it was reserved solely for those who were able to afford it, namely being royals and anyone who was ridiculously rich. In ancient China, however, this was different because purple was made using plant dyes. This meant that it was more accessible to a wider audience and thus was quite a standard colour. As the Western world moved into the 20th century, the suffragettes took the spotlight in fighting for women's right to vote. This noble act created real change, but only for a handful of women, namely white women. Misogynoir and discrimination against women of colour was still rife, and though that's not relevant to this video as a whole, it felt wrong to skip over it given that not many people look into it. It needs to be said. So, yeah. In England and later the US, the suffragettes adopted the colours green, purple, and white. Here, purple was used to represent liberty, royalty, and devotion to the movement. The colour purple. I felt I couldn't fully explore the symbolism and legacy of the colour purple without looking at the film which carries its namesake. Directed by Blitz Bazawule, it was originally adapted from the 1982 Alice Walker novel of the same name. I was really tripping over those words, but I got through it. You could feel the stumbling, but I did it. The book was previously adapted to film in 1985, directed by Steven Spielberg, and also to a musical from roughly 2005 to 2008. I haven't read the source material or watched the previous adaptations, however I do still want to touch on the most recent iteration of the story. The plot follows the character Celie through her life of hardship. We watch and discover more about her life, her love, her joy, through the women which inspire, guide, and love her. The title references significant themes and moments within the book and film, namely the field of purple flowers that Celie walks through with Shug. This is where she first feels freedom after losing her sister. I wondered how the colour would serve to create meaning throughout the film, and my first thought was of the physical manifestations of the colour. I thought of purple bruises, and how the violence and trauma Celie suffered can be represented through the colour present on her skin. Yes, bruises show purple, but the pain goes deeper than just the blood under the dermis marked by the hands of her husband. It's her skin as a whole, her suffering as a black woman. There's also a moment in the film where, like spoilers ahead, Celie, as my nan would say, put her mouth on Mr., her husband. In doing this, she put a kind of karma or hex or magic on him, and he suffers, we'll just leave it at that. It's very cathartic to watch, but what intrigued me was that purple, the colour that represents Celie, is being associated with a kind of magic or external power. The relationship between purple and mysticism is something we'll explore more broadly later in this essay. In the film, Celie and a character named Shug Avery share a tender love. The choice of purple that overarches the entire film made me consider the colour's association with lesbianism, as well as queerness as a whole. On to queerness and the colour purple. Purple was for a while used to represent lesbianism, with the likes of Renée Vivian, a writer and poet described as the muse of violets after her sapphic poems. During the early 20th century, the term lavender also became a slang word to describe gay men. We would be remiss to not explore the colour purple and its association with queer cultures and flags, namely that of the bisexual, intersex, non-binary, genderqueer and asexual communities, though there are many more identities that probably do use this colour. Purple in the bisexual flag represents plurality, a very difficult word to say, and an attraction to more than one gender. In the intersex flag, it is symbolic of the gender spectrum, outside of the binary. In the non-binary flag and genderqueer flag, it represents a merging of male and female identities, and in the asexual flag, the colour is used to signify the community as a whole. Purple in the bisexual flag, I literally just said that, don't know why I'm rereading it. Let's move on. I want to postface this description of the flags with my source, I guess. That source is Volvo. Yeah, the car company, Volvo. Why they are disseminating information on queer identities and culture, I do not know. I'm happy to see inclusivity, and this might be completely pure and innocent, but I do feel that this could allegedly have something to do with the next topic we are about to discuss, called purple washing. So what is purple washing? Purple washing is a term which describes the adoption of feminist and bisexual thought, mostly bisexual though, language and culture to mask exclusive and or discriminatory rhetoric. The tactic has, in recent years, been adopted by corporations and sometimes whole governments to mask the oppression and suppression of entire groups of people. The effects of purple washing are mixed in that there are positives and negatives to it. On the one hand, it offers visibility to community discourse, reducing the risk of erasure. On the other hand, it's hollow. It tokenizes communities to appear progressive, sometimes without addressing any of the issues which those communities face internally. Purple washing is oftentimes quite overt, but I feel it's more insidious where it's quiet and more clandestine. We love the word clandestine. It is in these spaces that it can spread misinformation, breeding hate and discrimination towards the groups in which it performs allyship for. It's in these spaces that we can't see. And speaking of things that we can't see, let's move on to UV light. UV radiation, or ultraviolet light, describes electromagnetic radiation which spans the spectrum between visible and X-rays. Ultraviolet light is invisible to humans, though species such as dogs, mice, bees, etc. can perceive it. Despite it being a thing which we can't see, it helps us in a multitude of ways. UV light is used in water sanitation, specialty lamps, forensics, and medicine. UV light can also be damaging, with the potential to cause diseases such as skin cancer. It's surprising to think that UV is able to cause the disease which it also cures. I find that really odd. Really interesting and also odd. Ultraviolet light is also used. Sorry, I had to really look at that because also and used, there's no space between them for some reason, so it just looked like Alsust. I'm like, what is that? What is that? Ultraviolet light is also used by some animals to produce the phenomenon of bioluminescence. This is the process by which sunlight is absorbed and re-emitted as a different colour or frequency by the animal or plant. If we could see in ultraviolet, the world would look so vastly different than it does now. It is already too beautiful to fully comprehend. I can't even begin to imagine how the world looks under its full spectrum. It must look like magic. For ages and throughout cultures, purple has been used to represent magic, mysticism, and the occult. The Ryan Coogler film Black Panther 2018 made use of the colour purple, where it symbolised the mystical power of the heart-shaped herb and ancestral realm. The film subverts the colour's typical use to distance and other characters, instead opting to use it as the central colour story, representative of culture, strength, and connection. In this way, it reminds me a little of purple's use in the colour purple. It is also used positively. It seems that purple is regularly used to represent a connection with the higher external self or divinity. This is the case with the crystal amethyst, a purple variation of quartz, and now I'm really mad that I didn't put my quartz in the background. I have amethyst, I have quartz, this could have been really nice. Anyway, in some Dharmic religions and traditions, purple is associated with the Sahasrara, or crown chakra. This chakra is one of 7 and represents connection with the divine. In practices such as Santeria, originating from Cuba and derived in part from Catholic and Yoruba West African traditions, the Orisha connected with purple is Oya. Oya has power over the dead, storms, winds, and cemeteries. She's also a protector of the Niger River. Again, it means that purple in a mystic sense represents something that we can't quite see or touch materially. It is divinity, the power of a storm, unseen forces, and protection. So, to conclude, you might be wondering why I've chosen to look into these different facets of purple. To answer, I'm interested in beginning to understand the colour's use as a kind of liminal space or bridge. I see it as being like the synovial fluid between the joints of your bones, a physical meniscus or bubble of oil in water. I can't explain to you why exactly those images are being conjured up when I think of purple. Again, it might be a kind of synesthetic thing. I wonder if we can use the colour purple differently in different contexts, of course, to better learn about ourselves. In my opinion, purple is a phantom colour, but that doesn't take away from its realness. I'm not arguing that cultures, philosophies, communities, and spiritualities that use the colour don't exist. On the contrary, I'm arguing that they inhabit the space between spaces. Space is not limited to just two. Purple's airy multiplicity seeks to grow beyond boundaries and continually expand, something like the astrological sign of Sagittarius, which is associated with purple. I wonder, could we see our communities, philosophies, and nations move towards a more purple way of being? A way that allows its citizens to be, act, and think in more fluid and less rigid ways? Could we see the absolute freedom of marginalized groups, toppling of hierarchy, and integration of a kind of holistic, natural magic in our everyday life? I don't know, but I like the colour. I want to be movable and plasmic in my thinking, able to imagine something new. Like a lot of my previous work, I don't have a fully fleshed concluding point. I don't want you to adopt a conclusion that I have about purple, but I do want to spark thought and dialogue. I want to continue a conversation that shares interesting facts, thoughts, and viewpoints. And on that note, I'd like to ask you, what do you think about it? What comes up? How does it haunt you? Thank you. I will see you soon.